Started. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lincoln Lancaster County Planning Commission on December 16th, 2020. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available at the front of the chambers with the clerk. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. In order to meet the required social distancing protocols, we must limit the number of people inside the chambers. Therefore, no more than 10 individuals will be allowed in the chambers at once, excluding Planning Commission members and staff. Staff is assisting individuals who are present and wish to testify on an item on today's agenda by ensuring that each person has signed in. Staff will direct you into the chambers based on what item you are testifying on and your position on that item. Once you have testified, you should exit the chambers using the doors to the right, and then the next individual will be directed in. Interested parties can observe the meeting on the monitors located outside the chambers. Based on estimations, we are staggering the times of various hearings over several hours. These times are identified in parentheses on the agenda. We are encouraging attendees to arrive no more than 15 minutes before their scheduled hearing. Please note that an agenda item will not begin prior to the time posted. In the event that the allocated hearing times go quicker than estimated, there will be breaks in the hearing. If you have parked in the parking garage across the street to the north, the gate is open and no parking coupon is necessary. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, commissioners and the staff, cellular telephone usage is not permitted in the chambers during any portion of this meeting. We appreciate your cooperation on that item. The Planning Commission action today is final on agenda item 4.2C, special permit 20047, which I believe is actually going to get deferred. However, any aggravated person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council or County Board by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or the County Board. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held December 2nd, 2020. Is there a motion?
So moved. Campbell.
Second, Shear.
Jerry?
Okay. Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Jerry to read all of the consent agenda items into the record. Once those items are read, she will ask if there's anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we will ask you to stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will then be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Jerry, can you please call the items on the consent?
Sure. There is just the one item. Item 1.1 is Comprehensive Plan Conformance 20016 to review as to conformance with the 2040 Lincoln Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan, a proposed amendment to the Yolande Avenue redevelopment plan to add the Revolution Wraps redevelopment project for the construction of a 12,000 square foot building, parking, and associated improvements on property generally located at 1801 Cornhusker Highway. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this item?
Doesn't look like it.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting this site?
No, doesn't look like it.
Is there anyone here wishing to speak on this consent agenda item? If so, please stand and state. None? Okay.
Doesn't appear to be. I'd entertain a motion.
I would move approval of application comprehensive plan that it is in conformance with the comprehensive plan 20016.
Second, Edgerton.
Jerry?
Okay. This is for the approval of the consent agenda. Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
I'll now ask Jerry to call request for deferral that we received.
Okay, we have received a written request from the applicant to defer the proposed Fire Ridge development applications, and I will read those into the record. It's item 4.2A on today's agenda, annexation 20014, to annex approximately 74.74 acres. The associated change of zone 20038 from AG Agricultural District to R3, and the associated special permit 20047 to allow for a community unit plan with 510 proposed residential dwelling units on approximately 137 acres with requested waivers. All of these are on property generally located at 10400 Van Dorn and 2300 South 98th Street.
I will entertain a motion for deferral to the January 6th, 2021 meeting.
I would move approval of deferral on all three items.
Is there a second?
Second, Edgerton.
Okay. I think we do have some people that are wanting to testify. However, I do want to note that individuals who are testifying today will not be allowed to testify on January 6th, 2021. Just want to make that note for anyone who is here to testify today. I think we do have a few people on Zoom. Do we have anyone in the audience that wants to testify on this item today? Okay, then let's go ahead and go to our Zoom, and I think we have,
We can go ahead and take action on the deferral.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's fine, no,
Go ahead.
and that basically continues the public hearing.
Yep, sorry.
That's okay.
Go ahead and call the vote.
Okay, this is for deferral
ahead
of
of
these
myself.
three items to the January 6, 2021 Planning Commission hearing. Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Beck, yes.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
Now let's see if there's anyone who would like to testify on this agenda item before we move on. I don't think we have anyone in the audience, but I think we do have some individuals on Zoom that would like to testify. Just a reminder, if you testify today, you will not be allowed to retestify again on January 6th, 2021, and you can certainly defer your time to testify till then if you'd rather do that. So the first person I have on my list is, I think, Zubin. Zubin, are you there?
Yes, thank you. I'll defer my time to testify until January 6th.
Thank you very much. Next on my list is Jay Bastani. And it's just the initial J, I don't know.
Hello.
Yes,
I'm
hello.
not sure if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
And I would like to defer till January.
Very good. We will look forward to hearing you on January 6th.
January 6th or 26th? Say that again.
Yes, January 6th. Thank you. Next on the list is Julian Branker. Julian, can you hear us? Mr. Branker? No? Okay. And the,
Planning Commission, it does not look like we have that person logged on to Zoom right now.
Okay,
very good, thank you. Next on the list is Brian Vanus. Brian, can you hear us? No, he's also,
oh, he's not.
you
Okay.
also defer testimony until January 6th. Very good.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes?
Okay. Yes, I would like to defer mine to January 6th as well.
Very good. Thank you. And it looks like we do have one audience member that would like to testify on this matter. Sir, if you'd like to come up?
Is this SP 247?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. If you would just like to come up and state your name and address first, we'll take your testimony.
You know,
Remind him that.
Tom, he walked in late, so you might remind him.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
The item is being deferred today.
No, I understand.
And if you want to testify now, we're welcome to take your testimony now. However, if you testify today, you will not be allowed to testify January 6th.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Darren Rich. My address is 1733 South 105th Street. I'm also the president of the Camelot Acres Homeowners Association. I will keep this, hopefully keep this brief, as I have submitted most of these comments on the form, on the public comment form. But in general, I would say that we are against this CUP, against the Fire Ridge development. We understand that the city is expanding, and especially with the new sewer trunk going in, we understand it's going east. But the way that the Fire Ridge development is planned for right now is it's too much in terms of density. We feel, especially even asking for to change the rules in terms of minimum lot size for these duplexes. Right now, there's 510 lots, with most of those lots being very small on the duplex side, and so it really doesn't fit into the character of the square mile where it is now, which is larger homes, acreages, and so forth. It was said there was a informational meeting by the consultant who mentioned something about that the density is similar to what is proposed or happening at Wandering Creek across the road, but that is really only true if you take into account, if you divide the number of lots by the overall acreages, and much of the, I think it's 147 if memory serves, in Fire Ridge, the proposed development, much of that is unbuildable lowlands. And so that's the only way that the density is similar. So we just feel that that as it's proposed right now, it's too small of lots, too high a density, especially for the character of the neighborhood. Now, I understand, the developer is deferring to make some changes, and who knows, maybe this is the changes they're making. I don't know. So a couple other things. As of right now, there is a green space between the Mopac Trail and these Phase 5 lots. We would propose or ask for a condition that some landscaping, some trees be included in that area to help shield between the development and the Mopac Trail, again, to help preserve the character of the Mopac Trail and to shield from the existing homes. The other comment I would make, and I know this is a little bit out of the control because this is a county thing, but 98th Street was supposed to be paved years ago, supposedly, and it is still not paved. Especially with 8th Street being closed down right now with construction, there is just so much traffic on 98th Street, and obviously with another 500 some lots, that will only get more and more, and there's already dust problems, already terrible washboards. So we would request, if possible, that 98th Street be paved before this development is started. The last thing I would like to say on the positive side, we are in full support of the site-specific condition 1.1.23 regarding traffic on 105th Street, and like to thank planning for adding that condition, which would eliminate traffic on 105th Street until 75% of the homes in Phase 5 have occupancy permits. And one other thing I would just like to introduce, and this is in process right now, and this is also just for the planning folks. Just one note: our attorney Mark Hunzinger has spoke with one of the developers, Peter Catt, who has, at least verbally at this point, agreed to a condition that the developers include a provision with their builders that construction equipment and vehicles do not use 105th Street, rather 98th and Van Dorn, when, in fact, 105th becomes open, still asking for that construction equipment not use 105th Street. This is today a privately owned road by the Camelot Acres Homeowners Association. And so that, again, the developer has agreed to that according to our council. And so he is in process of putting together some wording to be provided to us and to planning for that. That's all I had. Thank you.
Questions for the testifier? Mr. Campbell?
When the 105th Street is now a private road and it's asphalt and no curb and gutter and so on.
Yep.
As the development goes along, will they be upgrading 105th with gutters and curbs and?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. What I can say is our homeowners association just a few months ago spent around $170,000 to totally resurface the road, and not with, not to city specs, certainly.
Right.
It's asphalt. We spent a lot of money on that, and that's why we want to keep traffic off of that, especially during construction. I suspect that the road will be taken over. There is a public access easement on it now. I suspect that, it will be, during annexation, it will be taken at that point by the city/county.
Thanks.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anyone else in the audience wishing to testify on this item before we move on? All right, very good. We will now proceed to public hearings. The staff will make a brief presentation. The applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, and then those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given the opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. If during your testimony you have copies of documents or materials you would like distributed to the Planning Commission members and or included as part of the record, please provide that information to the clerk for distribution. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes, then you will have 1 minute to wrap up your testimony. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the Commission votes to defer action or continue the public hearing. Jerry, please call the first public hearing item.
Yes. Item 4.1 is Comprehensive Plan Conformance 20017 to review as to conformance with the 2040 Lincoln Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan, a proposed new south of downtown redevelopment and strategic plan, which would serve as a guide for the redevelopment activities within the redevelopment plan area. The proposed redevelopment plan area consists of 263.5 acres, more or less, bounded by South 10th Street, South 17th Street, A Street, and L Street. Staff recommendation is a finding of, or is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
No, it doesn't appear to be.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting the site?
Appears not. Director Carey.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. David Carey, Director of the Lincoln Lancaster County Planning Department. I am here to kick off our conversation today about the South of Downtown Redevelopment Plan and Strategic Plan. We will have Director Dan Marvin from Urban Development come up as the formal applicant, but I wanted to start things off mainly because this is a little bit of a hybrid type of comprehensive plan conformity action that we're asking from you, because we have a combination of a redevelopment plan, which normally would be solely with urban development as far as that type of work activity is concerned. But this is also a strategic plan, so we've had a lot of planning, work going into this as well. So I also wanted to kick this off by kind of showing our support for it, that this has been a lot of work, a lot of time, a long time coming, actually. We've had a lot of great effort going on with the neighborhoods to the south of downtown to get to this point. And I just want to highlight that to make sure that you are aware that there's been a lot of good conversation. We've gotten much further along than where we were a few years ago with this topic. I think you'll hear some testimony today that will acknowledge that and show support as well for where we're at. I also want to point out that this is not the plan unit development, the PUD. That's another step that will take place in the future. There has been a lot of discussion about the PUD as being the actual zoning mechanism that will be used to allow for some more of that flexibility on the lot development and the mixed uses and things like that that are in this plan. It was felt that it needs both a little bit more time, as well as it would be nice to do a little more outreach to the neighborhood, preferably outside of the COVID restrictions next year sometime, so that we can continue that really good dialogue and make sure we have that package of a PUD that we really feel good about and that the constituents involved really can support as well. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it off to Dan Marvin, our Director of Urban Development, as the applicant, and he will provide an overview, and then we will have some testimony. So I appreciate your time today, and I'll be available for some questions later on. Thank you.
Director Marvin.
Good afternoon. David stole my thunder. So I'll have to kind of change what I was going to say a little bit. But yes, this is a combination of a redevelopment plan, which meets the state statutes that you need to have be able to offer tax increment financing, which would be typically what we would bring to this body, and a strategic plan that helps guide those efforts. I know that all of you are aware that I was in here a month ago and we were talking about our Affordable Housing Action Plan. One of the key components of that is a recognition that we need dollars into rehab existing rental properties. And it's one thing to ask for dollars from the person that owns the property, but the triggering effect of that is the consequence is it could raise rents up. So we want the units that are in principally all over the area of Lincoln to be improved, but we want to recognize that it has to be done in such a way that it doesn't create a hardship on the tenants that are in those buildings. So one of the elements that we've done this on the O Street corridor, we've done it on West O, we've done this in Havelock, and that is to create a district TIF so that we can then use district TIF revenue to use, in this particular case, our goal would be able to use it to rehab existing buildings as they apply for rehab of those buildings, and try to create as much coordinated dollars to rehab and have the biggest bang for our bucks without an adverse impact with the residents that live in that neighborhood. David mentioned the thing about the PUD. I think that's an exciting tool, but again, that's not something for today. I think that would come before you at a future date, and it would be laid out, and we'd have a public testimony in the same way. But I think that what we've recognized, again, with the Housing Action Plan is, as creative and flexible as we think the current zoning system is within the city of Lincoln, there are difficulties. And I think Sean can speak to some of those difficulties that he's experienced firsthand in terms of how you build buildings with setbacks and others. So the PUD, especially in this neighborhood, will be an important tool to helping assist in those redevelopment efforts. We've got lots that are either narrow and long or square-shaped, and they're just, I won't call them non-conforming lots because people are living on them, so they conform to somebody living there. But they may not conform with the current zoning standards, and we think that the PUD will be another tool in that step to creating the flexibility of redeveloping those lots in a way that best fits for that neighborhood. You have the maps there, you have the executive summary. This has been an area that urban development's long taken efforts to try to revitalize. You'll notice if you drive down 11th Street, there's a bicycle lane down that area. There are lights that go from J Street down to, I think, A Street. And those lights were paid for through block grants that we've received and helped put those in there. It's been an area that's been near and dear to many of the people, Wynn Ermstead in particular, and we're trying to make efforts to rehab that district. And I have to include alleys. We would like to be able to include alleys and streetscape designs as well to make it the most, desirable, habitable, affordable area in Lincoln to live. I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Director Marvin at this point?
Dan, I am curious. With regard to the redevelopment plan, how do you, once this plan is in place, how do you go about with prioritizing all of the wonderful work that's reflected in the plan and the strategic plan as well? I mean, there's a lot there.
There is a lot there. Well, I think it's probably going to be done in a couple of different ways. First of all, someone may own a building in that area, and they would come directly to us and ask for some assistance through tax increment financing, and then this would serve as a guiding document to help drive that discussion on the appropriateness of that redevelopment for that particular property. And again, the other way would be to use the district TIF financing tool to help provide, as we did in Havelock, what we would consider to be grants, or in some particular cases we could do them as loans, but most likely to be done as grants for facade improvements or other improvements, energy efficiency enhancement tools, to partner those funds with specific buildings in that district.
Yeah, okay, that's helpful.
Commissioner Campbell?
Dan, just out of curiosity, why, I understand L and A and 17th, but why did it not go to both sides of 9th Street? That seemed to be, is that in a different neighborhood group or something?
I might let Sean speak to that issue. I know he's going to be coming up here.
Okay.
I suspect that, the borders are going to be difficult to identify. Everett neighborhood tracks along in that area, and then you track across into another neighborhood across 9th Street. But I think Sean would be best to answer that question.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
So, first, let me say, great plan. First time sitting and reading how we're looking to sort of redevelop this area. My initial question is more around just the displacement activity. And I'm looking at it from both lenses, from a resident side and builder or developer side. And I see there's mechanisms to enable developers, help and build accordingly and not change rent. But how does that impact the residents who are there, especially when you're potentially changing zones, changing housing, changing rents? What considerations are given?
Well, I think there's a lot of material in here, way more than you would typically see, to address that particular concern of displacement. I think that's been a long concern of the neighborhood. And again, one of the goals that we're trying to do, if we can create dollars for rehab of buildings, is to do it in a way that doesn't trigger rent increases, and then which in effect would then cause displacement. Zoning changes, the ones that I think are frequently discussed would be areas where it would be appropriate. There's mentions of Austin, Texas, and how in older neighborhoods maybe the first floor could be more of a live-work unit, which wouldn't necessarily be something that's currently available in that neighborhood. But again, those would be things that would be brought forward when we talk about changes with the PUD.
Commissioner Ball, may I ask a question based off of that? Sure. Director Marvin, you stated in your response that you would, to Commissioner Ball's question, in terms of redevelopment, you would do it in a way that would minimize disruption. Could you be potentially more specific? Because as I read the plan, it seemed to be that the primary method of limiting disruption would be to, it seemed to be to simply implement over a period of time. Are there other methods that you envisioning the city undertaking to disrupt?
I can tell you what we've done and what we'll continue to do, in particular with tax increment financing. As an example, is someone can reach out to us and say we'd like to be able to do some rehab within this particular building. We're going to create an increment within that building, and what we can do within the redevelopment plan that's brought before this body then would be able to identify a threshold by which they could go no further in terms of rent. So in particular, we've had several projects come before this body, And in that redevelopment plan that's been brought is a cap on the amount of rent as long as the TIF period is in force, which is 15 years. So that would limit the amount of rent to 60% of area median income, as an example, as the way we've done a couple of other projects that have come through here. So that is a way of ensuring that the rent rate that is charged by the person who's receiving those public dollars does not increase beyond 60% of area median income.
And do you anticipate that that limit would be on projects that would be receiving tax credit housing money, or just all products, any product receiving TIF within the district? Or as an on case-by-case basis?
I think it's a case-by-case basis. We haven't crafted a particular policy on that. That's certainly been a goal that we've had when we have projects, and I think on older buildings that have received that, I think it's been well received by the development community to be able to do that. I think there are I think you're well aware that we received some grant funds from HUD in terms of lead-based paint. This is an area that I think we need to be able to apply lead-based paint grants in this area to clean up and reduce the exposure that kids under 6 may be exposed to in terms of lead-based paint. So these would be new dollars again that would help take care of windows and doors and thresholds, and again would be rehab dollars that would help also in maintaining the housing stock in that area too.
Other questions for Director Marvin at this time? No? Very good. Is Sean going to come up?
Yeah, I think so. And
Okay.
Commissioner Campbell, I was thinking the layer of where the blight area was might have ended at 9th Street too. That could very well have been the district. The district that is before you is confined by, it can't go outside the boundaries of a previous blight study, and that blight study was done in 2007, I believe, and it might have limited it to 9th Street.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you. And Sean, are you going to come up next? Wynn is here too, so I didn't know who was.
Good afternoon. My name is Sean Reba. My address is 1516 Sunburst Lane. I am here, I'm with an entity called the South of Downtown Community Development Organization. The past 3.5 years, we've been working very hard to develop a framework for all community development efforts in a portion of Everett neighborhood and near South neighborhood. And as we've been talking about those boundaries, it's roughly 10th to 17th A up to KL in that area. Just quickly, there's about 5,200 folks that reside in this area, and the housing stock is made up of 94% rental property. So just so you're kind of aware of that. Our community development activities that we've been really focusing on fall under workforce development, affordable housing, neighborhood safety, infrastructure improvements, and what we lean on the most heavy is the community building and the engagement portion of our work. So those are kind of the things that we've been leaning into. And some examples, I just want to kind of demonstrate some of the examples of the work that we have been doing. These are some neighborhood accomplishments that I think are very noteworthy. We have successfully created a community space called the Art Hub at 11th and B. We have worked hard to locate a bike link kiosk at 13th and F. We worked very hard to bring in a turning lane, bike lanes, and safer crosswalks on 13th Street. We've created the first community land trust in the state of Nebraska at 1105 East Street. 3 community makers markets, a beautiful mural at 11th and G. Hopefully you've seen that. If you haven't, please do so. We've worked with partners to bring in a drive-through career fair. In this pandemic, we've been really having to respond in various ways. So we had over 200 cars drive through to access employer information, and also just developed numerous community partners over the course of these last 3.5 years. The beautiful thing about these accomplishments is that it's based on the listening. We've been listening to residents. We have been going to where people are at. We're going to their doors, we're going to joining them at the table, and we're going to all their meetings. We have canvassed probably over 3,000 doors in the area. We've hosted a number of community conversations, block parties, countless community events. And like I said, we have gone to every single meeting that you can possibly think of. Whoever wants to invite us, we will be there, and we want to listen and have that conversation. So that's really what we've been up to. So this plan is really a culmination of what we have heard for the last 3.5 years. We know that this is kind of the beginning point. We have to start somewhere, and we also understand that this plan will evolve over time. And I just wanted to kind of emphasize the inclusive portion of this process has been, we have worked to talk to and listen to as many people as we possibly can who reside in the neighborhood. And that just does not stop. This is going to be an ongoing. We definitely need to continue to have those conversations and take an accurate pulse of what folks are really wanting to see in their community. So that's the inclusive part. The equitable part is we work very hard to center the resident leadership and their voice as we move forward. That's going to be critical as we develop and implement this plan. I think we want to create a space where they can determine what their own community looks like. So we're very resident focused and centered. So I guess today I'm asking that you adopt this plan. I'm going to use the reference of a table. We've been building a large table to get everybody around it. What we need from you, this is the first step, is to set the table for us, and that's by adopting this plan. We will then work our backsides off to make sure that we continue to get as many people as we possibly can around the table to provide input and be a part of the decision-making process. So you're going to set the table. We're going to continue to build the table. And like I said, we've been going to every meeting. We're just going to scoot all these tables together and make one big, large table and really work forward on what folks are really wanting to see. So at the end of the day, we really want to support the folks that already live in this neighborhood. We want to build on the assets that already exist in this neighborhood. And we definitely want to drastically improve access to opportunities so everyone can thrive in this neighborhood. So with that said, we would love for you to help us set this table because we want to continue to build it. And we think that the best way to do that, to get this thing started, is to adopt this plan. I'm going to be quiet now. I think I probably ran out of time anyway, but I'd be more than happy to take your questions.
If you needed more time, we will.
I got it. We're good.
Commissioner Campbell, I think, has a question.
Sean, can you clarify on what Dan answered as to why it doesn't go over at least through 9th Street? Is that a different neighborhood?
Yeah, so there's a number of different conversations, criteria that we considered there. Yes, so first of all, one, that is the South Salt Creek neighborhood, and they respectfully declined in wanting to be involved with this whole initiative. So we wanted to respect that. Secondly, I think it's a natural cutoff for the census tract. So we're focusing on 2 census tracts, census 20.01, 20.02. So I think it's a natural boundary. And also we have it's a major thoroughfare, so it kind of naturally feels like a natural cutoff. And it also could be, to Dan's point, it might have been originally, and I don't know this for a fact, but it could have been part of the original blight study where it ended. So there were a number of things that kind of helped determine that boundary.
Well, a lot of what you've generated in the plan would be very applicable to 9th on over west.
Yeah, we have to start somewhere small,
right,
and try everything with a pilot and figure out, we got to work out the kinks here. I mean,
Yep.
We're just getting started. In fact, I would love to kind of respond to some of the other questions around the displacement and other concerns. We have to figure some things out first before we start scaling this out to other neighborhoods.
I can appreciate
And
that.
I would agree to your point. I think everything that we learn in the south of downtown can most definitely be applied in various other neighborhoods. Because there's a lot of other neighborhoods that, I think would be excited about some of this work, so.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for Sean at this point? Okay. Sean, I consider you one of the applicants of this, so we might have questions for you later, too.
Sure. Can I make one more comment?
Of course.
Okay. And I just want to respond to the displacement comment. I'm going to just simply be very honest with you. I am scared about this. And I think, talking to the folks, this is one of the major concerns that folks have. A lot of folks that live in this neighborhood. They fear displacement and gentrification. So I guess for me, how I'm going to respond to that is, I think we're going to continue to do the work that we are doing by centering residents and what they prefer and creating those spaces for them to be a part of the decision making. But I'm also scared in the fact that I'm not scared about what it is that we're doing now, because I think adopting this plan is a very amazing first start to get us going. But I do think that we're very deficient as a city. We don't have a number of tools that should be in place to help prevent and mitigate displacement. So this is really kind of a challenge for our organization, to the city, to all of you, to the city council, to the city departments, that we need to be working very closely with residents to come up with a mitigation plan. There are a number of tools that we don't have, and I have a list of them, and I would love to present those, but I'm not going to do that today. It is critical that we work with residents to come up with a displacement mitigation prevention plan, and that is our plan as an organization. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it's going to require a lot of different partners. It's going to require a lot of political will, and it's going to require some protections for renters. There's going to be some policy that's going to have to be presented. So I think what's going to be very critical is getting this plan adopted today, and then also making sure we're coming up with, actively, it's going to really matter what we do next, because I think we do need to take action. I am very concerned, and I can't even imagine how concerned residents are who don't have many choices. So with that said, thank you for listening. Any other questions?
I think I'll just mention, since you brought it up and we're on the topic now, I'm very concerned as well.
Yep.
This is probably, in my mind, one of the most difficult things that have come. This is the most difficult thing that has come before me as a planning commissioner in my almost 5 years on this board, because of the potential displacement issues that sit before the residents of this neighborhood. This weighs on me heavily. I am grateful to hear your concern as well. So thank you for mentioning that. Let's continue on and see if we have questions later as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bet. Does that wrap up our applicant testimony then? Okay, very good. Is there any testimony in support? Please go ahead and come forward. And if you could just please state your name and address before your testimony, I would appreciate it.
Hello, my name is Andrew Neal, Neill. My address is 811 N Street, apartment 319, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68508. Good afternoon, members of the Lincoln and Lancaster County Planning Commission. Thank you for extending this opportunity for testimony from members of the community. Today I will be speaking in support of the South of Downtown Redevelopment and Strategic Program. COVID-19 pandemic has affected all of us. However, few people have been as affected by the people living in traditionally neglected and marginalized areas, such as the South of Downtown community. It is estimated that roughly 30% of renters in Nebraska are at risk for eviction, which would be an unprecedented catastrophe during normal times, but even more so during the ongoing pandemic. The people living in the south of downtown community are especially at risk for this due to them not having access to affordable housing, along with other various factors such as lack of access to good health care and lack of access to food. These factors put them at additional risk for various health risks from COVID-19 and additional risk factors such as losing their housing. For that reason, I speak in strong support of adopting the resolution, which would put measures in place to provide affordable housing and communal spaces for people to gather to prevent the disastrous effects of the pandemic from affecting an already marginalized and at-risk population even more so. I truly believe that the south of downtown has done an incredible job of speaking with people who live in this community, taking stock of their needs and their desires for the development plan. And I agree that there is a risk of displacement. However, I do believe that the proposal put forth for rent caps in accordance of 60% of the median area income is a good first step in addressing this risk. For that reason, I do believe that the redevelopment plan is possibly the best plan at the moment to address these issues and to prevent further displacement and risks down the road, even after the pandemic ends, whenever that may be. I yield my time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Questions for the testifier? All right, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming down today. Anyone else here wishing to testify in support, please come forward. Mr. Catt.
Good afternoon. My name is Peter Catt. My address is 6400 Artisan Way in Lincoln, Nebraska. Thanks for the opportunity to testify with this protocol. I wanted to see you, so I needed to take my mask off so I could put my glasses on. I'm speaking in support of this proposal, primarily because, particularly in this holiday time, who could be opposed to Santa Claus, puppies, rainbows, mom, and apple pie? There's really nothing in this plan that anyone should be opposed to. I think, however, it can be made much better. I've been working, looking, investing in the Near South neighborhood for 20 years. And while this is a good document, it can be made better. And I'm of the opinion over the next 5 years, it will make absolutely no difference to what happens in the Near South neighborhood. None. Now, for you to understand my position, I need to explain to you my position about what I call funny money. So, funny money, I don't want you to think it's negative. I've been a fan of funny money. I was involved in the board that redeveloped the Ambassador President apartments in downtown Lincoln for the first time. They've been redone again. Those projects would not have happened with massive infusions of funny money. Tax credit money, TIF money, grants, loans, forgivable everything. Funny money plays an important part in being able to move forward a community and do redevelopment. However, there's not enough funny money to fix what ails in the Near South neighborhood. And so the problem with every plan in the Near South neighborhood that I've dealt with over the last 20 years is that it never addresses the fundamental problem we have in the Near South neighborhood. In my opinion, the fundamental problem is the lack of private market investment in that area. We've not had people being willing to invest in that neighborhood for 40 years. And until we solve that problem, until we make that neighborhood attractive for the private sector to come in, it won't get better. It can't be better because the city and the county and the state don't have enough money to fix the problems. I don't know how much time I'll have, but I want to give you some indicators of what I think is measures of success to accomplish this. Number one, for success performance of the plan, how much non-funny money private sector investment is invested in this neighborhood over the next 5 years? I've suggested and been an advocate in all of the different meetings that we've had for the last long time, that we need to have a test of Pete's theory that restoring the marketplace in that neighborhood will make a difference. My suggestion was to take Good Hill Boulevard, half a lot depth on both sides from the Capitol down to South Street, and make it a developer-friendly, free, go-have-at-it zone. The other zone I do the exact same thing to is the disaster between 9th and 10th Street from south of this building all the way to South Street. Let's see if the marketplace can make a difference. And then the biggest problem, the reason for the market not investing, is exactly what this plan sets out. Not less regulation, more. Another PUD, another permission for any developer to go do anything in this neighborhood that has to happen, and then you got to meet with 23 neighborhood groups, and you can't get permission to be able to go do what needs to happen. So if we really want to have the near-south neighborhood succeed, we need to have a viable plan that will make a difference. I'd be welcome to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Mr. Catt? Commissioner Campbell.
Peter, I'm having a hard time understanding how you're supportive of this plan when you actually want to go way beyond what the plan dictates at the present time.
No, there's a lot of unknowns in the plan.
Okay.
This isn't mutually exclusive with the all that's happened in this plan is that it ignores the important role that the marketplace needs to play and ignores it. So it's an addition. There's nothing wrong with this.
Okay.
But it's incomplete. And if people like passing plans, which I've been around town for 30 years, I can go pull a shelf of plans off the table that we've all thought were great ideas that never made a difference. And everybody pats themselves on the back that we're going to fix near south. Actually, when Mr. Marvin was on the city council, I started to create what I called a private plan for the near south neighborhood. And I got a group of probably 15 or 20 of us together. And I called it block by block, a plan for the redevelopment of the near south neighborhood. And I put that together with the idea that we've got a nice grid, and that if these funny money dollars were invested in the center block and targeted, it would encourage everybody in the blocks that touch that block to make those investments. And the purpose of the funny money investments was to demonstrate that there is a place in this neighborhood for developers to make money.
Would your plan not lead to the gentrification of the neighborhood?
Absolutely, and it needs to. We have a neighborhood that's 90% renters. That's a fundamental problem. And if the neighbors control it, it's going to continue that way, and that's fine. If the neighborhood wants to continue to have the investments in its neighborhood not change, and to continue to have affordable rents as opposed to other things, fine. That's a choice the community can make. But I think neighborhoods are better that are not 90% rental. And that some percentage, a key plan on this needs to be that we should target getting 30 to 40% of the units in this area is owner occupied. It makes a difference to the community. It will have the best impact at making this neighborhood better. Not in here, because we can't talk about it. And the reason this whole plan came forward, I was involved in the previous one, and the neighborhood came unglued about gentrification. That's why we spent, I don't know, how much more did we spend? $200,000 with this one? That's not going to make a difference.
Other questions for Mr. Catt?
So one of the concerns that was raised earlier was about displacement. And one of the challenges we know that the city of Lincoln has is affordable and quality housing for folks that aren't in a position to be able to own a home at this point. The number of families on the waiting list for housing right now that are homeless is large and growing. So I understand that maybe is not your priority, and that's not your area of focus, but if what you are saying is let's just open it up and develop it and make it all owner occupied, how is the city of Lincoln then going to address the displacement of those 94% renters?
Okay. For your information, I'm a huge fan of affordable housing. I advocate for it all the time. I think we miss a whole lot of opportunities in our community to make it better. I will be here within the next 6 to 9 months on some plans that I have on what we can do on affordability. I don't think affordability is solved by having a neighborhood not get better. And if you impose restrictions, how many investors do you think are going to go to Near South when I hear rent control? That's what I heard. That's what's going to come down the path. No investor's going to go down there. That's why I had 20 or 23 rental properties in that neighborhood 10 years ago. I'm so glad I sold out. I've had people from Omaha ask me, where can I invest there? And I said, well, my experience is you'll invest years trying to get projects improved in Near South. It ain't worth the effort. So I think they're two separate issues. Don't lump them together. You have an affordable housing problem, and you have a Near South quality of life problem. And if you try to solve both of them at the same time, they're both doomed to failure. You need to attack them as best you can when the right opportunities present themselves. And what I'm suggesting is that a 90% rental neighborhood is one that needs to be encouraged to have the private sector make investments, to get owner-occupied people living in there, to improve the quality of life for everybody. And if we need to work on affordable housing issues, we need to work on those in other places of the community as well.
Other questions, Commissioner Gills?
No, not this time.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other party here in person that would like to testify? I don't think we have anyone else. But I know we have a couple of individuals, I believe, on Zoom that are here to testify. Mr. Johnson, can you hear us? Mr. Johnson, can you hear us? We will pause for just 1 second to see if Mr. Johnson's online.
Can you hear me?
Mr. Johnson?
Yes. Okay, very good. My name is Kyle Johnson. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I come to you as the chairman of the South of Downtown Coalition Steering Committee. And this is a committee that was formed to perform community outreach, get participation in idea sharing, determine priorities, and it was a long process. Started 2.5 years ago. Keeping in mind that this neighborhood is not just 90% rental, it's 93% rental, 7% owners. Part of the goal of our steering committee was to get stakeholders together, not just the residents in the neighborhood, but community leaders and other stakeholders. As we started, there were 3 chairs of this committee: Michelle Suarez, Marilyn Farr Johnson, and myself, and the others based on time. Michelle moved to Houston and Marilyn is doing other things. As we started the process, we were blessed with staff, which included Kent Sechrist, Dan Marvin, Lynn Hermstead, Sean Reba, and Isabel Salas. And Isabel is a community organizer with South of Downtown. The composition of the committee included the Lincoln Community Foundation, the City of Lincoln with Dan and Wynn, Colin Christopher, John Carlson, City Council members, Carl Eskridge, followed by Tammy Ward, the state of Nebraska, primarily because of parking issues, which are prominent in the South Downtown area, particularly close to the Capitol. NIFA was a strong representative, John Turner. There were property owners and developers on the committee. The F Street Church was represented by Jeff Hurspink. The Downtown Lincoln Association, NeighborWorks, Habitat for Humanity, the Lincoln Housing Authority, representatives of the Everett and the South, Near South neighborhood associations, and of course, residents of the neighborhood. There were 3 residents that were active and attended the meetings faithfully. Bryan Hospital was also represented. The committee had subcommittees, the first of which was on housing, the second on property owner investment. And there we probably ought to talk about some of the specifics. The Community Land Trust, we now have one. That's another device that can be used to get affordable housing protected long-term. Another device is opportunity zones, where people can move investment money, for example, from stock accounts right into real estate and preserve their tax basis. Zoning density issues, we talked about that in the PUD, and those are things that help the displacement issue. Tax increment financing, historic preservation tax credits. Dan mentioned the lead abatement issue, which improves the housing and doesn't necessarily increase the rent. Gentrification is a major thing to be concerned with, but by using some of these funny money devices, as Mr. Catt referred to them, they are ways that property owners, including owners of rental housing, can improve the properties, they can reduce their costs, and they can do that without raising the rent, which is to the benefit of affordable housing. Another subcommittee was the Finance Investment Committee, and it looked also at housing tax credits, which are available and can be helpful to owners of property. In terms of the process of the South Downtown, it's important to recognize again, as Sean said, the South of Downtown community organizers did knock on over 2,000 doors to meet people. I understand now it's over 3,000 doors to understand the problems of the community and talk about their desired goals, which are important. The committee had 16 tri-chair meetings, which eventually turned out to be a chair meeting. Those meetings took place before the 16 steering committee meetings. There were 29 members of the committee, and probably an average of 20 attended those 16 meetings. There were 18 subcommittee meetings that consisted of 74 members, some members that appeared on more than one of the subcommittees. Those subcommittees and the committee reviewed and developed and considered over 100 strategic ideas and suggestions, and over 22 other redevelopment plan meetings or conference calls. To reach out to the community, we had meetings at the Everett School where citizens in the area were invited to come in, not just citizens in the area, everybody in Lincoln, to come in and look at some of the written proposals to help us determine priorities. And that was done 3 separate times. That's a bit of the process that was used, a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of people involved, people with great interests in south of downtown as an area, but also Lincoln generally. And it's important work. And on behalf of the South of Downtown Coalition Steering Committee, we support the plan and encourage its adoption. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Johnson? All right, very good. Thank you, sir. I believe next on our list is Ms. Graff. Ms. Graff, can you hear us?
Hi there.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
You are ready to testify whenever you're ready. We are good to hear you.
Okay, do I need to say my address?
If you could give us your name and address, we'd appreciate it.
My name is Anna Graff. I live at 344 South 18th Street, Lincoln, Nebraska. And I'm here today in support of the redevelopment plan. So the south of downtown neighborhood is already an amazing place, but this plan could help improve the quality of life and make sure that people have access to affordable housing, and also do things like reduce racial inequality. The focus on racial equity is so vital, and I'm really glad that it's highlighted in this plan. Housing is a really big way that racism has been and continues to be exacerbated. And it's also been a really big part of creating racial segregation and racial inequality, both in this country and also in Lincoln. If there was not a focus and an effort to work towards racial equity, that would just continue to perpetuate that inequality. And so I think that a really important way to increase access to affordable housing and preventing displacement, which is such an important topic, is by having non-commodified forms of housing, where housing isn't about making money for landlords or for investors, such as what the South of Downtown Community Development Organization has been working on through the Community Land Trust. So I think just like expanding that would really make such a difference and could really just have such an impact. In addition, limits of rent are a really important part of that as well. I really strongly disagree with what was raised earlier, that private investment will solve this. Allowing the market free rein leads to gentrification and displacement. And there's such extreme examples of that in other cities. And so I think it's really important that there's proactiveness to prevent that happening in Lincoln. Having mixed use and denser zoning, some of the things that are mentioned in this plan, is really beneficial for ensuring that there's adequate and affordable housing. But then it also makes it easier to bike and walk to get around. This leads to healthier and safer communities, and communities that are more connected, something that right now I think we can all appreciate. It also has positive economic benefits and leads to people visiting businesses more, which research has found. The plan discusses that residents are interested in starting their own businesses, and by having a community where people can interact and where people can walk and bike to get around, those businesses are more likely to start and to be successful. Part of that is also about improving and expanding public spaces and green spaces. It improves the overall quality of life and could also impact the very stark health disparity of life expectancy in this neighborhood. That health disparity is going to be challenging to change, and part of that is due to the stresses that things like income and racial inequality exacerbate, as well as housing inaffordability. But having access to green spaces can be really beneficial. As research has shown, that living near green spaces leads to better health outcome and increased life expectancies. So I'd really strongly encourage you to adopt this plan and to work even stronger to make sure that racial equity is continued as an important part of it, and housing affordability. I'd also like to thank you for the opportunity to testify virtually, and I encourage you to keep this through the rest of the pandemic and beyond, as it is an important measure to keep these meetings accessible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Graff? Okay, very good. Thank you very much. All right, any testimony in opposition? I see no one else in the room, and I've not been notified that there's anyone else online, so we'll move on to staff questions.
I have a question for David, I think.
We'll just take all the staff we can get.
Yeah. David, when we were discussing the west boundary of the district being 10th Street, I understand why it is. It makes good sense, Sean, what Sean and Dan said. But can you talk a little bit about how the South Haymarket, which is down on 9th, which is very close to 10th here, how that could tie together and maybe perhaps help bring some continuity to this whole area south of downtown?
Certainly. So that's a good point to bring out the fact that we do have different neighborhood plans that are adjacent to or slightly overlapping each other. So the south of downtown plan that is adopted, that actually we're seeing some very good implementation happening, as an example of a plan that actually is showing some action happening. The way that we're looking at how these different pieces and parts play together, is that it's important to have input and buy-in and participation from residents and leaders in those particular neighborhoods. And as Sean mentioned, that that there was an agreed upon opt-out for the other neighborhood that we're talking about now. So I think at some point we certainly can expect to engage that neighborhood to see what their vision is and how they might fit into this. I think a lot of what we have to look for is the south of downtown plan, which is seeing some implementation happening, and I expect a lot more implementation will happen and activity. And that'll carry over to and be supportive of and provide some momentum for the south of downtown plan. And the south of downtown plan itself will have that kind of, will infuse activity as well, because you get that vision in place, and then you have a target to go towards. So I think these all can interplay, but it is kind of like a pieces of a puzzle thing, where you want to make sure that you've engaged and included the members of particular neighborhoods before you assume that certain things are going to happen or they want things to happen. So it probably is more like a future discussion / work effort for the South Saw Creek neighborhood. So that's the way that we're looking at that.
Okay.
And so certainly these different plans and different activities could influence that neighborhood for sure. But it was, at this time, it felt like focus was needed on the south of downtown area. And then in context of the PUD that will eventually be put together and come before you as well, I think previous testimony was very spot on in saying, we want to see how that works. We want to test it. We want to make sure it works well. And hopefully it can become a model. It won't be exactly the same all around the city, but other neighborhoods could implement something similar, and hopefully would be implementing the items that work the best for them. So that's another way to look at it, that there's these steps to take in order to get the action to happen.
It seems to me, I don't remember all the specifics of the South Haymarket plan, but in terms of the strategic initiatives, there's a lot of similarities with all of these. And, it just seems to me like we're moving in the right direction on all of it. It's just a matter of, at some point, making sure they're all coordinating and talking to each other in terms of different districts.
Right, I agree.
But I appreciate the comments.
And I would mention one more piece to the puzzle, which is the recently adopted downtown plan, which specifically called out, the relationship with the south of downtown as being kind of the closest, nearest neighborhood that can, interact with the downtown with all the strengths and features of the downtown. That's different than obviously what that urban neighborhood is to the south, but that they all do interplay with each other. And so all of these pieces are looking at each other to make sure that it makes sense, like you said.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
I think that part of the connectivity that we're trying to create also envisions connectivity to Cooper Park, too. So we have the new downtown park that we're working on, the one Lynn calls the tornado because it's got the little tail. So the connectivity to Cooper, the connectivity to the downtown park, and then to David's point, the downtown master plan, it envisions in the downtown, but it certainly would stretch down 11th Street, kind of a greenway boulevard that goes through that area as well. So the connecting tissue to south of downtown is going to be 11th Street, and then east-west corridors that connect people into Cooper Park or other areas and create this kind of vitality where people are being able to walk and move amongst the neighborhood.
Nice.
Other questions?
I guess I would like you to respond to the comments by Mr. Catt previously with regard to this plan being a good document that espouses a lot of great ideas, but isn't really the structure that will allow anything concrete to move forward, if you will. Maybe I'm paraphrasing a bit, but I'd love for your comments on
Okay.
on that idea.
Well, as kind of the new kid on the city block here, but I will say, what Dallas will tell me is that, and we certainly appreciate the investment that Mr. Camp made in the Haymarket area, but predating those investments was a master plan for Haymarket. So when you bring people to Lincoln and you show them one of the jewels of our community, most people will wind up going over, when you can eat outside and do other things, you'll go to the Haymarket. And the Haymarket vision was created in a master plan that has spurred literally millions and millions and millions of dollars investment in that area. So I'm not sure I agree with that. As I was sitting back there, I was thinking, we're not going to allow funny money to go towards one of the concerns, which would be the destruction of affordable housing. So that doesn't mean that we have banned the rules of property ownership in the south of downtown area. If someone wants to go there and invest in a building and do all the rehabbing that they want and charge $2,000 a month for rent, I may not necessarily agree with that, but I haven't banned it. Those rules apply, and we haven't changed those rules. But the question is, are there going to be overarching goals that we want to be able to put over that to help guide departments like ours that help administer tax increment financing to use those to set other goals, which would be to protect the amount of affordable housing that we have in our community to serve populations of people who are working in the downtown as waiters or waitresses or in other jobs that are not the highest paying jobs, so that they have a decent place to live. I think that's a worthwhile goal. And within the Haymarket, you have the Hardy and Granger building, which do provide affordable housing in a very high rent area of the city. And we did create Block 4 redevelopment with 43 additional affordable housing units tied to a TIF, the TIF eligibility. So we've been able to do that in all different kinds of neighborhoods. And I would expect we'd be able to do that here because it is an attractive area. It's green, it's walkable, but it's a little more residential feel than living in the downtown.
I would add to what Dan said by saying that another example of the investment coming because there is a strategy and a vision to the future is the downtown master plan. That's versions of it have been in place for 20 years or over 20 years. And you just look to the projects that Dan and his department keeps bringing forward, there is that investment happening. So just because the plan says that it should happen or it should happen this way, and then it doesn't just sit on the shelf, I think that is one of the better examples of that. And we're starting to see that with the South Haymarket plan. I think we'll see it here with south of downtown. And to speak to the concern with displacement, which I think is extremely important to put on the table with this plan. It's the right thing to do. That doesn't mean that the door is going to shut on investment. What it means is we're going to be careful with how those investments are being used, as well as what the role of the city is and how the voices in the neighborhood itself are being heard. It's meant to say that we're going to be assessing that and watching that instead of just letting it happen without any understanding of what the impacts are. So yes, there's going to be this balancing act, but it's important to do it that way. Nuance is a thing. We've got to be careful with that, and we've got to make sure that we know what's happening so that the negative effects of some investments don't become, too big or permanent in that sense. So I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it's kind of the reality of how these things work. And this plan sets out and is honest about all these different factors that go into these decisions.
To jump on that comment a little bit, Director Carey. So as I told Sean earlier, I was happy to see some of the issues brought up in the report, but could you speak specifically to the data that the city will actually be using or maybe this is a question for Director Marvin too, the data that the city will actually be using to measure the outcomes that we anticipate this plan to generate. Because at the end of the day, we can say we're going to be cautious, we can say we're going to be cognizant of the issue, but at the end of the day, how are your departments measuring whether or not affordable housing is impacted in this neighborhood?
I'm going to start, but then I think Dan will have a lot of good information to share on that. But we do want to be data-driven. We do want to be able to point to information that says this is or is not happening. And then you can start to talk about what the impact is of that and then strategies of how to deal with it. So I think that that's going to be an evolution for one thing. I don't think we have all those pieces ready to go. We have a lot of information, everything from annual census information on census tracts and block level things. That gets into kind of the renter owner occupied information that is kind of a building block of the discussion. So we already know we have some of those things, and part of this is just being attuned to the level of effort that's needed to know what's happening and keeping up on that data. And so that's part of what Sean does, for one thing. So having a community development corporation is a great asset for this neighborhood. Not every neighborhood has that. So that work can get done by folks like himself and others that are willing to do their work. So it's a little bit of that's part of the strategy, but Dan might have more project-driven type of information that's going to be there.
I think that the rehab dollars that we can put into a neighborhood, that's certainly a trackable number. Another thing that came out of our action plan is that older apartments tend to have more complaints in terms of to building and safety. So to the degree that we can create a multi-pronged strategy to work cooperatively with landlords to help rehab, over time we should see fewer, not more, complaints for building and safety. So I think that'd be another data point that we would want to look to. We certainly have data points on what the average rent rate is in various neighborhoods, so we can certainly track that and see if those rents are changing in an adverse way to affect that population. So we would be able to look to a lot of different sources to try to track our impact on those neighborhoods.
And I think that that's something for me, generally speaking, I think would be useful. This plan has been years in the making. This has been a discussion point for years around the city amongst multiple groups. And, I think in a lot of ways we talk about data and how important data is. I don't think there's any reason that data should not be in this report, and that there should be a standard to which this report states the number of units or the percentage of affordable housing units in this redevelopment area needs to stay at this point, or should not drop lower than this point. Or maybe that's okay if home ownership occupancy increases, or something along those lines, because those data points, as you mentioned, Director Marvin, are easy to track. Mm-hmm. It's just whether or not we, as part of this plan, actually want to hold the accountability aspect as a part of the plan, or we just want to say, well, generally speaking, we're going to try. Because at the end of the day, we have the data and the ability to track the data to see what's happening. It's whether or not we want to make that as part of the plan. And I think going back to some of the displacement issues as well, and some of the issues that I bring up too, I think the same can be said about minority displacement within the neighborhood as well. We know that we can track it. It's not part of the written plan. It's not part of the strategic plan, other than to reference it. There are no metrics by which to follow, and there could be, and I wonder if there shouldn't be. Director Carey, a question I have for you, I'm sorry, did you have some? Question I had for you is that it seemed as though from Commissioner Scheer's comments that the anticipated potential plan would be to look at this particular redevelopment area as a test to see how other redevelopments could happen around town and other areas of town. And the reason I wanted to ask this question, even though it may be far premature to ask it, is it seems almost as if we are setting ourselves up for a whole lot of redevelopment plans for a whole lot of different neighborhoods across the city, as opposed to having one standard for older neighborhoods and maybe trying to tackle it that way. I mean, for example, are we potentially looking at, if I redevelop in this neighborhood versus if I redevelop in the Hartley neighborhood, am I going to be looking at two completely different PUDs that are going to be completely different that I'm then going to have to try to understand in order to build?
So that is a great question and comment, because we've talked about that, and there certainly are different ways to handle this. I would point to our design standards for older neighborhoods, which is more citywide. It doesn't cover the whole city, but it is the standards that are applicable to the older areas, older neighborhoods. I would say with our experience with this effort has highlighted the desire, at least from this neighborhood, and I do think we would see this from most neighborhoods, maybe not all, but most would feel this way, that there is a strong desire for their neighborhood to be not only unique, but to show that there was an understanding of what this neighborhood is like and what the goals and objectives are. And if you honestly try to do that, and which is what that honest effort did happen in this proposed plan and strategy, that you are going to have differences, that you're not going to be able to do it the same everywhere. And so under that model, I personally and then professionally feel like that is acceptable, because I think you end up with more buy-in from the neighborhood itself, which the idea there then is that you end up with more investment and more activity in the neighborhood, because you have those stakeholders that are really actively trying to implement the plan that's in place. So I feel comfortable with potentially different PUDs being out there, because I think there will be an understanding after going through efforts like this in a process of what that neighborhood's vision truly is. And then the follow-up PUD and whatever those applicable regulations are will make more sense because you've gone through that process. And even if they are different in different areas of the city, that's a good thing, because you have uniqueness in different neighborhoods. It can happen naturally, but it also can happen with the support of a plan like this, so that it's better understood by those. And then at least the investment that does come in has that go-to to say, okay, this is what I need to do if I want to do this investment in this project, and here are my options, and I can go talk to urban development, or I can do this over here. We don't have those even in place really yet. So I think getting to that point will actually help activity and investment, because then it lays out the expectation of what the opportunities are and then what the expectations are. So I think it's a little bit of different ways of perceiving that. But your point is well taken, that it can ultimately become confusing if you want to try to do different projects in different areas of the city. But hopefully, by being clear with the expectations and the visions, that's not the case.
Wynn, did you have something you
Hi,
wanted to
good
say?
afternoon. I'm Wynn Yermster with the city's Urban Development Department. And first of all, I apologize for being late. I read the agenda wrong. I didn't think this item started until 1:30. So, so some of the things I was going to say, I assume others said before me. But I did want to make a comment about your comment, Commissioner, about the data and how we will evaluate. One of the things that we wrote into this plan that is unique, that we have not written into any other plans, is the idea of putting together an implementation team that meets at least once every other month to evaluate and to set priorities. There's an awful lot in this plan, and we can't do everything all at one time. So putting together a committee that certainly will have, I think should be led by South of Downtown and the city, and then include other stakeholders, that sets the priorities of what are we going to tackle first, how are we going to measure those things. So it gets very much to that exact point that you were making, that, and we haven't done that with other plans. So this was something that was unique to this plan, and I think will contribute to the successful implementation.
I was excited to see the mention of the bi-monthly meeting in the plan document.
Mm-hmm.
I was very excited to see that. What mechanism is in place to ensure that happens?
I think just the commitment of city the city by the adoption of this plan. The commitment that we have shown over the last 2-3 years working in this area, working with particularly south of downtown. I think that shows that commitment will continue. We've invested too much to just say, okay, we're done, and to walk away. The other point I would mention, I don't know if that came up or not at all earlier, is the effect or influence of Prosper Lincoln on all of this. I think some of the work that Prosper Lincoln actually led to the creation of the South of Downtown Community Development Organization. Sean and I remain very active with Prosper Lincoln, particularly in the areas of affordable housing. But that effort as well, which parallels this and is part of it, I think is another tool or another element that keeps us going.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. Sometimes when I look at other communities and other strategic plans that may have been implemented or may not have been implemented, sometimes the overall success of those strategic plans playing out over a series of years is the stability of the strategic plan partnership and whether or not that partnership continues. And oftentimes, I think in some communities, it's whether or not those strategic partners continue to be funded. And I guess, looking forward, because so much of this plan involves a strategic partner that is dependent upon funding in order to survive and continue, I will have to look at the question marks when the PUD comes forward to ask. I guess I'm going to have to ask what happens if the strategic partner goes away. Because at the end of the day, the PUD would stay, but all of the other stuff may not happen. And I don't know that the city of Lincoln, unless I'm misunderstanding you, Wynn, I don't think the city of Lincoln would probably pick up pieces that this plan envisions other community partners doing if they were just to simply go away or funding ceased.
I guess one of the responses I would have to that, if you heard Kyle Johnson talk about the coordinated steering committee, all the stakeholders that were involved, there is so much momentum here right now. It's not just, of course, we're here because we're the city, but and Sean because of his partnership. But there are so many people involved in this effort. I don't think they would let us walk away, to be honest with you. I think there's just too much momentum at this point.
Yeah. Other questions for the group? I have another question, probably for you, David. It's stated in here, coming down the road, and this is difficult, and I apologize in advance because we don't have the PUD in front of us, right. But you've given us a framework for a potential PUD coming forward. So this is an endorsement of this is a general step in that direction. So there was one quick reference in the report in regards to design standards for this neighborhood. Your staff has shown some design standards for multifamily housing. I think that was in reference to this neighborhood as part of the 2050 comp plan review process. Do we anticipate more design standards coming down the road for this area?
So that certainly could happen. I wouldn't say that necessarily will happen with the PUD. A lot of what the conversation has been to date anyways, and there will be more conversation before that PUD is ready to come forward, so it's not at all set yet. I would say a lot of the focus of that conversation has been how do we make sure that the PUD sets the stage for the reinvestment into lots that are non-conforming, to allow for at least some level of reconstruction to happen that right now under current regulations can't happen or are limited, and really focused on kind of that small single family or maybe the duplex type of setting for that reinvestment. There has been less emphasis so far on the multifamily side of it. So we could end up with a PUD that could very well have that in there, but we haven't gotten that far yet. But those conversations are going to keep going. So I'm answering it by saying that we don't know exactly what's going to be in this PUD yet. Certainly, design standards can be part of that. The mechanism of the PUD can carry those standards forward and be in place for that. But we don't have the answer yet of what this one will have in it. But I do know the focus will be on the ability to allow for redevelopment and reinvestment in those smaller lots that are non-conforming. That definitely is going to be part of it.
Yeah. Other questions at all? Only one other question that I had to do with the concept of, and maybe this is a question for Dan or Wynn, maybe looking at zoning and looking at the use of a higher level of home occupation here in the neighborhood. And the question that I had really had to do with, so this is a neighborhood where we're talking about the need for quality, affordable housing. It is adjacent to the central business district with hundreds of thousands of vacant square feet. Why are we discussing the conversion or the potential conversion of living space to live workspace in this particular area? That was a little, I understood the concept of, hey, maybe this is advantageous for, I guess, startup businesses or entrepreneurship, but it also rang a little, to me, a little strangely in that we want to talk about preserving housing space, but hey, let's go ahead and convert potentially some of this to workspace too.
I'll start off, and then I know Dan has a lot to offer there. A couple different things there. One is there's an idea here for this south of downtown neighborhood that in certain areas, not the entire footprint of this plan, but in certain areas, there'll be some focus on trying to get that live-work, multi-use type of setting. Your word was kind of an incubation type of startup idea. That's kind of the kernel of what is being thought of here. And quite frankly, what we've learned through this process and discussion about what can be done, what can't be done, once you get to a certain size, if that startup business gets to a certain size, that it's going to have to move somewhere. Hopefully it stays in the neighborhood, but the physical footprint may outgrow itself. Sure. And so that's where maybe the downtown ends up being kind of the next step for that business, maybe, or maybe somewhere else. But the idea here is to kind of get that activity in certain locations in this plan area. So it wouldn't be the sense of, there are certain areas of this plan that are identified as being for residential. And the focus is going to be on what can be done to improve that residential activity here in this neighborhood. But then there's other areas where this more kind of mixed use and commercial activity is being focused as well. So there is always trying to get to that balance point. But we have had those discussions about what happens if we've allowed this to kind of incubate, but then it has success, which is a good thing, and then what happens. So that's more of a process for the business or for the activity. And therefore, other places of the city might end up receiving that business over time. That's one thing that we talked about. I don't know if Dan had anything else.
Well, and we're, the genesis of this predates COVID. So a lot of the conversations are there ways that a person, might have a studio and maybe they're a photographer and that'd be a live work space. It might be prohibitive currently, but that would be a way to allow someone to have a live work unit, still be able to still live there because it's a live work unit, but then also be able to offset costs of a studio someplace for either photography or art or other types of things. And Telegraph District is an example. They have on their first floor that kind of live-work environment where they're allowing people to provide, their displays and the art, and we'll see how that takes off. But it's a dynamic plan, and those types of things, because of changes with COVID, may never come to fruition. But it was certainly a part of discussions a year ago before we were, locked down. And I think that if you look in, like I said, the example that they were using was Austin, that there were that kinds of transitionary live-work units into a neighborhood that worked well in other communities.
Thank you. Any other questions at all?
Just a comment.
Mr. Campbell?
The live work that we have going on right now is going fantastic. But it's like an individual who's a chiropractor, and they're going to he and his wife are living upstairs, and his office will be downstairs. We've got an ice cream shop that is doing exceptionally well, even in the wintertime. And so it goes on and on like that. And so we've been having, in fact, all our live work lots are sold.
Well, and I appreciate that it's working in other areas, such as Village Gardens or the Telegraph District. But, you know, the reason I asked the question was specific to, we're talking about a neighborhood specifically that we have heard has affordability issues, and we're talking about taking more living space off the table potentially further down the road. And what does that do? I mean, this is, I guess I don't see this neighborhood as quite the same as Village Gardens or Telegraph District.
Yeah, but I could see things that would be valuable in the neighborhood, such as a small barber shop. Could be any number of different things along that line. And generally, those are people that want to stay small as a business. I understand your point of it taking away living, but in other respects, it's attracting people into the neighborhood too.
Sean, was there something you wanted to add?
I have a couple comments. I just want to respond to your question.
Sure.
The neighborhood is made up of all kinds of folks, makers. They're making things. They're selling things. They're doing things. This is just one way for us to keep those folks in the neighborhood where they can actually supplement their income, improve their income, and potentially hire folks in the neighborhood and provide services for the neighborhood. So creating these spaces, I see your point, 94% rental, that doesn't allow folks that opportunity to live and work and really develop their small businesses. So we have the most creative and amazing neighborhood. There are so many makers in our neighborhood, and I want to support them. And I think that's kind of really what we're trying to accomplish. That's what we've heard folks want. So that's kind of the thing. That's kind of our logic behind that. Two concluding comments, real quick. I just wanted to respond to a comment that Mr. Catt made about how to fix the neighborhood. And I just wanted to kind of go on record by saying I'm really quite I'm exhausted by folks saying that, because the neighborhood's not broken. It's really it's the institutions, it's the policy that's broke, because it's denying folks access to healthcare, to education, to housing, to you name it. So I guess I would love, and I think this is why it's important, a very first step to adopt this plan, is that we need to really come up with all kinds of comprehensive approaches. We need to invest in the people and the property, but we first of all need to focus on the people part. So, and then finally, my concluding comment, and thank you so much for giving me this extra time, is that I commend all of you. This means a lot to me, to my staff, and to this neighborhood, that you're all having this conversation about gentrification and displacement. This is the conversation that we need to continue to have as policymakers and decision makers. Everything we do is going to impact the folks that live in this neighborhood. Everything we don't do could impact the folks in this neighborhood. So I'm just commending the staff, Dan, Wynn, David. This is a very important conversation to have. I just commend all of you. It means a lot to all of us to have this conversation. I look forward to continuing that conversation and coming up with actual policies that support this conversation. So thank you.
Entertaining motions.
I will move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Jerry? Jerry?
That was Campbell?
Yes.
Okay.
No, was.
Right, you seconded though.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah,
got it.
sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Just wanted to make sure I got it documented right. Ball,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Yes.
Beck, yes.
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0.
I would move that we agree that this fits within the comprehensive plan and is in conformance, number 20017.
Second.
Second, Yost.
Yep.
Comments?
I am in support of adopting this and saying that it is in conformance. And I'm sad that Sean left. I wanted to also thank him and all of the people on his team, and really appreciate the community-based approach that they're taking at looking at the assets of the people who already live there and what they're doing. People who live in a neighborhood often know the best about what they need. And in celebrating the gifts of the people who live there, I think this really creates a great opportunity, not only for this neighborhood, but for our entire community. So I will be in support.
I will also be in support. Many of the ideas that they're talking about in here, we can find existing neighborhoods in more wealthy areas that those things exist. And to have the idea and the opportunity to bring it to these neighborhoods, I think it can be very successful, and I think it can achieve the results that they're looking for.
Others? Commissioner Scheer?
First of all, I appreciate all the discussion we've had. I think it's been really great. And the staff ability to answer questions and things, there's just a wealth of information in the exchange that we've had, I think, which is wonderful. I'm going to support the motion as well. And I want to just elaborate on a couple things that, because I'm part of the design community in this city, that I want to make sure kind of gets in the record as part of my vote. The first thing is, in relation to the references in the plan document about regulations, standards, things like that, my overwhelming impression of the way those things are talked about in the plan is that there is a desire, and we will, as a city, attempt to not make these regulations and standards more restrictive than they already are, but to simplify them, to ease them. Those are words that I remember as I read the report, or I read the document. That's a good thing. As a person who's actually had an opportunity to work with Wynn on a project in this area, 11th Street, I can tell you that when you have a document like this that's in place when you start a project and you're trying to figure out what the design goals are and how you can implement them in a really wonderful way for the community, these kinds of things are important. And these kinds of standards that are written and the strategic initiatives that are written in this document really help with doing really good design. It's not restrictive at all to doing good design or to doing development. It's helpful. So that's one thing. I also want to quote on page 18 in the report under the section called financing. First sentence is, the primary burden for revitalization of the redevelopment area must be on the private sector. We talked a lot about, how can this best move forward? Is there a place for the private sector? What is that place? In reality, I think David alluded to this, or maybe even said it outright. This has to be a partnership. And I think the document really lays that out, that there's a huge role here for the private sector, but it has to be part and parcel with our public sector as well. So I really like the document. I do agree with Tom that from a metric standpoint, it would be great to try to figure out how that can be part of this. Maybe not in the document as we approve it, but make sure that gets, or has attention paid to it. But all in all, I think it's a really wonderful document, and I appreciate all of the time that members of this community have put into it, as well as staff. So I'll be supporting it, as I said.
Other comments? I will also be supporting the motion. As I said previously, there are things here that that do concern me a lot in terms of how this moves forward. What are the metrics and data being used to define success here? And I don't see those things spelled out here in the plan. I would have liked to have seen those things spelled out in the plan. As the PUD comes forward, it'll be interesting to see what the private sector says about some of the items here in the plan, and whether or not those will, they will find those to be productive in terms of redevelopment, reinvestment here in the community. I think we'll see that when the PUD comes forward. You know, I do think as we look at this plan and some of the things that were identified in this plan, and in relation to what we approved last month with the Affordable Housing Coordinated Action Plan, you know, I do think there are opportunities for regulations to change citywide that have been identified in this plan that really could be implemented citywide in short order. Hopefully that doesn't take years, because I think there's opportunities here that this plan identified that the Coordinated Action Plan didn't. And certainly, you know, lot sizes, irregular lots, what have you, are not unique to this neighborhood. They're all throughout existing core neighborhoods. So it'll be exciting to see, hopefully, those changes be implemented over time. I do worry about potential sensitivity with the private market responding to another PUD overlay here, whether or not they will respond positively to a potential increased design standard in the neighborhood. And I worry about that potential interaction with the private market. Stammering any potential redevelopment here. Time will tell. So, Jerry, can you please call the roll?
Okay, this is for a finding of conformance with the comp plan. Okay, we've got Campbell made the motion and Ryman Yost seconded. Ball?
Yes, it is.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0.
I move we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Jerry?
Is that Ryman Yost?
No, that was Edgerton.
That's Edgerton, okay. Thank you. Okay, Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0.
We are adjourned.
The